Tonight at 10, Theresa May hails a historic victory for the Conservatives in Copeland as they sweep Labour aside. They've got a lot to celebrate, pulling off the first by-election win for a party in power in 35 years.
This is an astounding victory for the Conservative Party, but also for the people of Copeland. You know, Labour have held this seat since the 1930s.
Meanwhile, Labour did hold on to Stoke-on-Trent Central, seeing off a challenge by UKIP.
It's a message about the economy, it's a message about jobs, it's a message about this country, but above all, it was a message that hope triumphs over fear.
We'll be asking why UKIP failed to win in Stoke, an area which voted strongly to leave the EU. Also tonight, the battle for Mosul. Iraqi troops enter the west of the city for the first time to face strong resistance from so-called Islamic State. A nerve agent classed as a weapon of mass destruction is found on the face of the murdered half-brother of North Korea's leader.
And I'm live in Hollywood amid the preparations for Sunday night's Oscars, where it might be the speeches and not the films that gets everybody talking.
In the south, murdered in South Africa, a Hampshire woman dies after a horrific attack by a gang of robbers. And the build-up to the Cup as Southampton prepare for their Wembley final on Sunday.
Good evening. Theresa May has said winning the Copeland by-election was an astounding victory for the Conservatives. It's the first time a party in government has taken a seat in a by-election for 35 years. Labour had held Copeland since 1935, but the Conservatives overturned a Labour majority of more than 2,500. The Labour leader, Jeremy Corbyn, described the defeat as very disappointing, but he said he wouldn't be standing down. In a second by-election in Stoke-on-Trent Central, Labour did see off a challenge from the UKIP leader Paul Nuttall, but with a reduced majority. Our first report tonight is from our deputy political editor John Pienaar. His report does contain some flash photography.
Sometimes party leaders seem to grow a little after a win. Theresa May's victory appearance here today told you she'd use the Tories' win in Copeland to claim she could reach people and parts of Britain no Tory leaders won over since Margaret Thatcher.
This truly is a government that is working for everyone and for every part of the country.
As for the idea the Tories could win too big, that good government needs good opposition, try telling them that, or her.
Does Britain need a strong opposition to hold you to account over Brexit?
Well, the opposition will do what they will do. What I'm concerned about is what the government does, what the Conservative government does. We are working for a country that truly does work for everyone, not just the privileged few. I think that's a message that people here in Copeland have heard.
Did you ever think Copeland was going to vote Tory in this way?
No. I mean, we could dream of it. I've been a councillor for 20-something years, and we dreamt one day it would, and nothing's ever like this has ever happened.
The Conservative Party candidate, 13,748.
It was a big win. The first win in a by-election by any government over its opposition in 35 years, and in a place that's been Labour since 1935.
It's been very clear, talking to people throughout this campaign, that Jeremy Corbyn doesn't represent them.
And this is Tory territory now. Labour folk don't like it, and some feel they know a reason why. Copeland depends on Sellafield. Jeremy Corbyn has opposed nuclear power.
The nuclear probably had quite a lot to do with it, the nuclear, because Jeremy Corbyn did say that he didn't want it. So maybe he did do a U-turn on that, but who knows?
The men have done no good when they've been prime ministers. So maybe a woman changes everything.
I don't think there's any hope.
No hope for Labour under Jeremy Corbyn?
No, I don't think so. And I mean, I have to back him because I'm a Labour man myself. I'm a member of the Labour Party.
But you're telling me it's hopeless?
But I think it is. He's not strong enough, eh?
Stoke had been a safe seat for Labour, but Jeremy Corbyn turned up keen to celebrate holding out against UKIP.
It's a message about the economy, it's a message about jobs, it's a message about this country, but above all, it was a message that hope triumphs over fear.
What about Copeland, Mr Corbyn?
He'd already been dogged by that defeat all day.
Our party membership is in good heart, it's very large, very strong, and we're going to be out again tomorrow and every other day campaigning to get the message across of social justice in Britain.
Yet beating UKIP in Stoke was a big relief to Labour.
You're going to resign, Paul.
And a painful blow to UKIP and its defeated candidate and leader.
This seat was, number 72 on our hit list. There's a lot more which will happen, a lot more to come from us. We're not going anywhere. I'm not going anywhere. So therefore, we move on and our time will come.
Paul Nuttall may not be on his way out as leader, but his campaign wobbled, then failed. And the question's been raised, when UKIP lost Nigel Farage, did it lose its way?
Oh, thank you so much. Those are beautiful.
So just now, Theresa May looks the biggest winner, ruling her party against weakened and divided opponents with an assurance that's almost regal.
And truly, well done indeed. I'll see you on Monday.
See you on Monday.
Yes.
But back to business means back to Brexit, and there's nothing easy about that. John Pinar, BBC News, Copeland.
Well, the Stoke constituency was dubbed the capital of Brexit after recording one of the highest Leave votes in the EU referendum last June. But UKIP, which was running against a Labour candidate who didn't support Brexit, couldn't win it. Our political correspondent Alex Forsyth has been looking at what went wrong for them.
The morning after a hard-fought campaign brought dawning realisation for UKIP. They'd been rejected by voters. The party had hoped for a big win. In Stoke, more than two-thirds of people voted to leave the EU. But even where Brexit proved so popular, UKIP suffered defeat.
People may have voted Brexit, but Brexit just doesn't mean UKIP.
No, it doesn't. No, and that's what we think UKIP's all about. It's just Brexit at the end of the day. They've got no coherent policies whatsoever, whereas Labour had.
Stoke's long been a Labour stronghold, a collection of West Midlands towns with a rich industrial heritage. A prime target for UKIP's leader, who's keen to prove the party can win over working people. But Paul Nuttall had a tough campaign, forced to correct claims he'd lost close personal friends at Hillsborough. Senior figures say that did play a part, but insist he's still the right man to lead UKIP.
Was this a UKIP failure or was this a Paul Nuttall failure?
No, look, this is a party failure. We haven't won. That is a party failure. Winning elections, winning by-elections like this takes time. People have to get used to you as a party. People have to get used to...
You've been around for years as a party.
We've been around for years as a party, yes, focused, as everybody said this morning, on one single issue, which is getting Britain out of the European Union. We're now evolving into something bigger than that, and we've got to get that across to the electorate.
This was a significant defeat for UKIP. Instead of proving it can win over disillusioned Labour voters, it's left struggling to explain what it stands for beyond Brexit. Its former leader said the campaign failed to cut through on key issues.
There is a debate in UKIP as to how strong we should be on the immigration issue. I personally feel we should own it. So we'll have to look at that and think, were we really tough enough? Were we clear enough with the electorate?
In Stoke, local UKIP members who were out on the doorstep admit the party must broaden its appeal, particularly given the Conservatives in government have promised to deliver Brexit.
There's no point in trying to sort of dress up as reasonable what was a defeat compared with expectations, certainly, but we need to press on.
Our number one target was to get the UK out of the European Union. We all know that. That's what we campaigned for, but that was only the first goal. We have to move on. We need to get our message across to people on issues other than the European Union.
But having failed to do that here in Stoke, UKIP is once again searching for direction. Alex Forsyth, BBC News, Stoke-on-Trent.
Well, let's go back to John Pinar in Copeland. And John, Labour were relieved to hold on to Stoke, but they've suffered this big loss to the Conservatives in Copeland. Where does that now leave the party and Jeremy Corbyn?
Well, it leaves Labour and Jeremy Corbyn with good reason to worry. The Copeland by-election, on top of a thick file of opinion polls, has convinced some Tories they can follow Margaret Thatcher in running away with millions of working-class votes. The danger to Labour, though, does not look existential, judging by Stoke. Jeremy Corbyn has time and space to prove the polls and the pundits wrong. But many of his enemies in his own party at Westminster will agree with their old colleague David Miliband, who's told Tomorrow's Times that Labour's in worse trouble than it's seen in the last 50 years, and it's Jeremy Corbyn's fault. There'll be no coup, there'll be no organised mutiny. They're telling me they think that would strengthen Jeremy Corbyn. In the meantime, they believe that Labour, as it stands, is simply too weak to win, too strong to die, deep in the doldrums and deeper in trouble.
John, many thanks. John Pienaar there. Iraqi troops have entered western Mosul for the first time in their offensive to drive out so-called Islamic State from the country's second city. West Mosul is the last IS stronghold in Iraq. They're surrounded, along with an estimated 750,000 civilians. But government forces today met fierce resistance as they fought their way into the city from the airport. Our correspondent Quentin Somerville and cameraman Nick Millard were the first journalists to head into the district of Jorsak, and they've sent this report.
The so-called Islamic State breached. The very first Iraqi government forces roll into West Mosul and into a firefight. IS were waiting and well defended.
Iraqi forces are encountering heavy resistance as they move into West Mosul.
It's taken them less than a week to get this far, but this is a victory 2 years in the making after the humiliation of the Islamic State sweeping across Iraq. It's an outgoing rocket there. But for these men, they realise that beyond here, beyond this neighbourhood, they're likely facing the battle of their lives. The assault started in now practised fashion, armoured columns moving fast across open ground. These Iraqi officers plotted the route. Past some greenhouses, they said, and right into IS territory. The Caliphate is shrinking, and with few options for their escape, IS is in a fight to the death. Iraq's superior firepower hasn't prevented it from suffering high casualties at the hands of IS. So while the attack was determined, it was cautious. Standing at the breach, the Iraqi commander in charge.
I don't know how long it will take to liberate this area. Our Humvees have now moved in and we will open the road towards IS.
Inside the city, signs of civilian life. But in the midst of all this, no one dared leave their homes. There are 750,000 people in the streets beyond here and a few thousand IS fighters. Distinguishing between the two will be very difficult.
When we liberated the last village, we lost a few people. But we overwhelmed IS. We have taken this area in Mosul and we will protect it, and we will not leave until we beat terrorism.
Iraq is finally retaking Mosul. It's the 6th day of the campaign, but in the words of one commander, it's only the first. The real fighting started today when they entered the city. Quentin Somerville, BBC News, West Mosul.
Police in Malaysia say the substance used to kill the half-brother of the North Korean leader at a Kuala Lumpur airport is one of the world's deadliest nerve agents. The authorities say tests on the body of Kim Jong-nam revealed traces of VX, classified by the UN as a weapon of mass destruction. From Kuala Lumpur, our correspondent Rupert Wingfield-Hayes reports.
Last week at Kuala Lumpur airport, someone chose to attack Kim Jong-nam in full view of at least half a dozen CCTV cameras. It was a very deliberate and very public act of violence. Today we learned what killed him. And it's even more shocking.
I've already confirmed it. It is the VX nerve agent, which is a chemical weapon.
Kim Jong-nam was walking across this busy departures hall last week when he was attacked at this spot. And now we know what was used to kill him. VX, one of the most deadly nerve agents ever invented. Just a tiny drop, 1/100th of a gram, would have been enough to kill him. VX is also banned under international convention, and yet someone decided to use it here, in the midst of this international airport. VX is colourless and odourless, with the feel of engine oil. Symptoms include coughing, shortness of breath, vomiting, and muscle convulsions. South Korea says the North started producing chemical weapons in the 1980s and has up to 5,000 tons of stocks. North Korea's young dictator Kim Jong-un already has nuclear weapons. Some think he is now sending a chilling new message by killing his older brother with the world's deadliest nerve agent.
They've shown that they want to be part of the weapons of mass destruction club and that they should be taken seriously. And if we do nothing, then we're going to be in a very difficult position. This is probably far more dangerous than the nuclear weapons program that has been much vaunted in the public over the last 12 months.
The more we learn, the more bizarre this story becomes. This is one of the alleged assassins taking part in a Vietnamese TV talent show. This is her Facebook page. Nothing about her suggests she could be a killer. About the only thing we know for sure is that Kim Jong-nam must have died in excruciating pain. His body convulsed, his lungs gasping for air. Rupert Wingfield-Hayes, BBC News in Kuala Lumpur.
Claudio Ranieri this afternoon spoke about his abrupt sacking by Leicester, saying that yesterday, my dream died. Ranieri led Leicester to the Premier League title just 9 months ago, but he was dismissed last night after a string of poor results that's left the side just 1 point above the relegation zone. Our sports editor Dan Rowan reports now from Leicester.
At least there's still some loyalty here in Leicester. Claudio Ranieri remained in demand this afternoon as both he and the city came to terms with his dismissal. The miracle worker out of work.
Is there anything you'd like to say to the fans, Claudio?
Yes, I'm very sad for them. I wish you all the best.
Emotions among the neighbours running high.
What he's done first is a disgrace. Claudio Ranieri!
Having masterminded the least likely and most popular triumph ever seen in the Premier League, the Italian has become the victim of its most controversial sacking. 9 months ago, Ranieri was the toast of Leicester.
Everybody, come on, man.
Cheers. Cheers. But the fizz has long gone. Today's press conference flat. The man who stood alongside Ranieri in the dugout left to describe his mood.
Bit shocked, as we all were. But his tone was no different. As I say, he very level-headed in terms of that's football.
Can you categorically say that he hadn't lost some parts of the dressing room, Claudio Ranieri?
It's pure speculation, but what I would say is there was a lot of frustration because of results, but he hadn't lost the dressing room.
But the ruthlessness of the dismissal has shocked even those who've spent a lifetime in the game. Former Leicester star Gary Lineker didn't just present Ranieri with Coach of the Year, he paid a very public price for doubting the team's success, and he's angry.
I mean, I'm not ashamed to say that last night when the news broke that I shed a tear. I shed a tear for Claudio, I shed a tear for football, and I shed a tear for my club.
Ranieri's barely believable triumph last season won admirers across the world. But since then, the euphoria has evaporated, the champions languishing 1 point above the relegation zone. Leicester's Thai owners said their club was in crisis and with Premier League survival on the line, decided to act. The fans are divided.
50% of Leicester fans wanted him sacked because of results. But for me, I would have kept him. To come back, find out he's been sacked after what they did last year, disgusting.
Ranieri's former rivals, meanwhile, were struggling to understand.
It's not only football. For me, there's few strange decisions in 16, 17. Brexit, Trump, Ranieri.
Tonight, Ranieri said his dream had died. Even if his former club now stays in the Premier League, his dismissal for many will forever be a symbol of betrayal. Ranieri's remarkable story restored faith in sport, and now something has been lost. Dan Rowan, BBC News, Leicester.
A woman who died after being hit by debris in Wolverhampton city centre during yesterday's storm has been named as Tanny Martin. She was 29 and from Stafford. Storm Doris brought winds of nearly 100 miles per hour. It caused power cuts and travel chaos as flights were grounded and train services disrupted. A man has been jailed for 6 years for killing an innocent bystander with a single punch in an unprovoked attack. Trevor Timon, who's 31, admitted the manslaughter of Oliver Dearlove in Blackheath in south-east London last August, but was cleared of murder. The judge said the senseless attack had caused untold misery for Mr. Dearlove's family. A former suspect in the murder of the black teenager Stephen Lawrence has been jailed for drugs offences. 41-year-old Neil Aycourt received a 6-year sentence. He was described as the man at the top of a drugs ring, which supplied cannabis worth £4 million to addresses in the north of England. Past problems are continuing to haunt the Royal Bank of Scotland. The bank, which is over 70% owned by the government, warned today that it had made losses of nearly £7 billion last year. That's 3 times more than the loss they made the year before. Our business editor Simon Jack takes a look at what's happening at RBS.
Not so much a lost decade as a decade of losses. 2008 was the big one, £24 billion. Since then, 4 billion, 1 billion, 2 billion, 6 billion, 9 billion, 3 billion, 2 billion, and today, 7 billion. £58 billion in total. For the 9th time in a row, fines and compensation for sins of the past have laid waste to any profits made, and further cost-cutting could mean thousands of job losses.
There will be job losses. I haven't put a number out, I won't put a number out. My view is always talk to our people first, where they're affected, and there will be job cuts in this organisation. There has to be, given that we, over the next 4 years, will take £2 billion of costs out of this organisation to reshape it to be a really good bank.
But that is not going to happen quite yet.
You will eventually see a coherent UK retail and commercial bank arising out of the ashes, but we're still a long, long way away from that. Even in RBS's own plans, we're 4 years away, and their own plans still have a degree of hope.
I stood right here in 2008. I did not expect to still be here in 2017, reporting on yet another multi-billion-pound loss. It wasn't supposed to take this long to fix, and the fact that it has shows that no one really knew just how big a mess the world's biggest bank at that time had got itself into.
In 2008, the government of the day announced an emergency £45 billion bailout to prevent a complete collapse. Could things have been done differently?
I think with the benefit of hindsight, should have been fully nationalised, then broken up, used in the national interest. But the taxpayers now stuck with the losses, and it will be some years before it can be returned in a way that the taxpayers get their money back.
The bank is much healthier today, but with more losses yet to come, it seems certain we'll be marking a full decade in the red this time next year. Simon Jack, BBC News.
This Sunday, the film industry's great and good will celebrate the 89th Academy Awards. La La Land, a tribute to Hollywood itself, is widely expected to do well, as is the coming-of-age film Moonlight. The ceremony is no stranger to controversy, and this year is set to be more political than usual. Our arts editor Will Gompertz is in Los Angeles and joins us now from the red carpet. Will.
Hi, I'm Rita. I'm watching all the preparations being made for Sunday's Oscars ceremony, which I have to say I think is going to be fascinating this year. Not so much for the movies, which are great, but we know all about them, but the speeches. What might the winners say in this very public stage about the world as it is now that will be memorable, that will capture the times? In the past, there have been some absolute crackers and some real howlers. I went to find out what makes a winning Oscars speech.
Oscar night in Hollywood, with the motion picture industry agog to know the winners of those coveted awards.
Once upon a time, going up to collect your Oscar was a straightforward affair. You shook a hand, smiled politely, and maybe offered a brief remark.
Thank you with all my heart.
Marlon Brando in The Godfather.
But then Marlon Brando upped the speech-making game in 1973 without saying a word and asking a Native American to explain why.
He very regretfully cannot accept this very generous award. And the reasons for this being are the treatment of American Indians today by the film industry,
In these politically charged times, this could be a vintage year for memorable Oscar winners' speeches, if those making them follow the rules.
First of all, you have to start with the hallmarks of what makes a great speech in the first place. So you have to speak with authenticity. You have to speak from the heart. You have to connect to the material and connect to the moment.
I sincerely hope I shall always be a credit to my race and to the motion picture industry. My heart is too full to tell you just how I feel. And may I say thank you, and God bless you.
OK, so anybody going up on stage to pick up one of these on Sunday night, except theirs won't be made out of chocolate, is being told to keep their speech down to 45 seconds. It is, though, of course, a live show, so theoretically they could bang on forever. Except the organisers have a humiliating weapon they can deploy, which is to ask the band to strike up and ground the winner out.
It's an awful feeling because I don't make that decision arbitrarily. The director tells me, okay, Harold, get him off.
Your time is up. Thank you very much.
Classic example of how not to do it. And that would be Michael Moore's example when he received the Best Documentary Award for Bowling for Columbine. There was a great amount of negativity about George Bush, who was the president at the time. His attack, though, was so personal, so clearly biased, that he was almost booed off the stage, even though nothing that he said was necessarily inaccurate.
This year, the Academy has asked winners to deliver a heartfelt, memorable message. That, or possibly face the indignity of hearing the dreaded wrap it up music. Will Gompertz, BBC News, Los Angeles.
Well, that's it from us. Now on BBC One, it's time for the news where you are. Have a very good evening. Bye-bye.